Rain tapped softly against the foggy windows of a small roadside diner, the kind of place that smelled of burnt coffee and yesterday's pancakes. Inside, under the flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours," a young woman sat in the corner booth with 2 children huddled beside her. Their jackets were thin, their eyes wide with the quiet kind of hunger that didn't just live in the stomach, it lived in the soul. The waitress had just set down a single plate, a modest serving of fries and a grilled cheese sandwich cut neatly into 3 triangles. The woman, her face pale from exhaustion, whispered with a trembling smile, "You 2 eat first. Mommy's not that hungry." Her son pushed one of the pieces back toward her, but she shook her head gently. "I'll have some later, sweetheart." Across the diner, at the far end where the lights were dimmer, a man in a tailored gray suit sat alone, unnoticed. His name was Ethan Hale, billionaire CEO of Hale Enterprises, a man whose face often appeared on business magazines and news channels. Yet tonight he looked nothing like the powerful man the world admired. His tie hung loose, his expression distant, and in his eyes flickered something rare for a man of his status, weariness mixed with a quiet ache. He had come here to escape the noise of a celebration he couldn't stand to attend. The company had just hit record profits, but the price had been steep. His marriage in ruins, his days spent chasing numbers that no longer gave him meaning. And then, through the low hum of the diner, he noticed her, the woman with the kind eyes and worn-out coat, cutting the last piece of sandwich in half to make sure her daughter got a fair share. Ethan couldn't look away. Something about that small act, that silent sacrifice, struck deeper than any business deal or speech ever could. He didn't see pity, he saw love. Pure, selfless love. The waitress came by their table again, apologetic.
"I'm sorry, ma'am, but refills aren't free after the first cup." The woman smiled faintly, nodding.
"That's okay. Water's fine." Her daughter's small hand slipped into hers, and for a brief second, their eyes met. Mother and child, bound by resilience the world rarely noticed. Ethan's heart tightened. He signaled for his check, but as the waitress turned, he asked softly, "That woman, what's her name?" The waitress hesitated. "Her? She's here sometimes. I think her name's Grace. Tough situation, from what I hear." Grace. The name lingered like a whisper in his mind. Ethan glanced back at her once more and saw something he couldn't unsee. Strength beneath fragility, hope beneath despair. The kind of quiet courage that reminded him of what he'd lost. He reached for his wallet, intending to leave a large tip, maybe even pay for her meal. But something stopped him. It wasn't enough. He didn't know why, but deep inside, he felt this was not supposed to end as just an act of kindness. As he stood to leave, Grace looked up, their eyes meeting for a fleeting second. He offered a polite nod, but she quickly looked away, embarrassed. Her son coughed lightly, and she wrapped her arms around him, whispering something that sounded like a promise. Ethan stepped outside into the rain, his car waiting nearby. But as he reached for the door handle, he froze. Through the glass window, he saw the waitress hand Grace a bill. Grace pulled out a few coins, counted twice, then closed her eyes. She quietly took off a small silver bracelet, tarnished but precious, and handed it over. The waitress looked shocked, refusing it at first, but Grace insisted. "Please," she murmured. "It's fine. We'll be okay." Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't felt this kind of ache in years. It wasn't just sympathy. It was a calling, deep and urgent. Something in his gut whispered that his life, as he knew it, was about to change. As thunder rolled in the distance, he made a sudden decision. He turned back toward the diner, water dripping from his hair, and pushed open the door. Everyone inside looked up. Grace, startled, clutched her children close as the tall stranger approached her table. Ethan met her eyes with quiet intensity and said, "Ma'am, forgive me for interrupting, but I think you dropped something." Her brows furrowed, confused. I don't think I did." He placed the silver bracelet back on the table, and underneath it, a folded check. Before she could react, he whispered, "Please, just let me do this." Then he turned and walked out into the rain again. Grace slowly unfolded the check, her trembling hands revealing the amount, and gasped so hard the entire diner fell silent. Grace's hands shook as she stared at the check, her eyes widening with disbelief. The faded ink on the paper showed a number so large it didn't feel real. Her breath caught. For a long moment she couldn't even blink. Around her the quiet hum of the diner faded into nothingness. It was as if the world had paused just to let her heart beat loud enough for everyone to hear. The waitress leaned over, eyes widening too. "Grace, is that—" Grace quickly folded the check, clutching it to her chest. Her throat felt dry, words barely escaping her lips. No, there must be some mistake. He doesn't even know me." Her children looked up at her, confused but hopeful. "Mommy, what happened?" her little girl asked softly, her brown eyes shining with innocence. Grace forced a smile, though her voice trembled. "Nothing, sweetheart, just finish your fries, okay?" But inside her mind was spinning. Who was that man? Why would he do something like that? No stranger had ever looked at her with such sincerity. Like he didn't see her as poor or pitiful, but as someone who deserved to stand again. After paying for the meal, refusing to use the check, Grace walked out into the cool night air, her children clinging to her hands. The rain had softened into a mist, the streetlights glowing in golden halos. She turned once, expecting to see the man still there, but he was gone. Only the faint sound of tires splashing on wet pavement lingered. That night, as she tucked her children into bed inside their small one-room apartment, she sat by the window and stared at the folded paper on the table. The walls around her were cracked and pale. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and the single heater coughed out more dust than warmth. Life had been hard, relentlessly hard, but she had learned to survive it one small act of faith at a time. Grace had once been a teacher. She used to stand in front of bright young faces, talking about dreams and courage. But when her husband died in a car accident 2 years ago, her world collapsed. The bills piled up. The landlord grew impatient. She had to sell her car, then her furniture. The last thing she sold was her wedding ring, to buy her kids' school uniforms. Since then, every day had been a fight to keep going. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices in the morning, waiting tables in the evening. Sleep became a luxury she couldn't afford. But no matter how heavy life got, she never let her children see her cry. "Mommy?" her son whispered from the small cot beside hers. "Was that man an angel?" Grace turned to him, startled by the question. He blinked slowly. "You said angels help people when nobody else can." Grace smiled through the sting in her eyes. "Maybe he was, sweetheart. Maybe he was." But deep down, a part of her didn't believe in miracles anymore. She had seen too much of life's cruelty to expect kindness without a price. The next morning, she decided to find him, not for the money, but to return the check. She couldn't accept charity, no matter how desperate things were. So she folded it neatly, tucked it into an envelope, and went to the diner again. The waitress recognized her instantly. "Looking for that man from last night?" Grace nodded. The waitress smiled softly. "You won't find him here, but I did hear him say something about Hale Enterprises. You know that big company downtown? Maybe he works there." Grace's eyes widened. "Hale? As in Ethan Hale?" The waitress shrugged. "Could be. Why?" Grace fell silent. Of course. She'd seen his face before, in news articles and business magazines and waiting rooms. Ethan Hale wasn't just wealthy. He was one of the richest men in the city. What was he doing in a rundown diner, eating alone on a rainy night? Holding the envelope tightly, she stepped out into the cold morning air, her heart pounding. A single thought echoed in her mind. Why me? She took the bus to the city center, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets. Standing in front of Hale Enterprises, she felt impossibly small. The glass tower shimmered like a mirror, reflecting a world that had never made room for people like her. Inside, marble floors gleamed, and the receptionist looked at her like she'd wandered into the wrong world. Grace hesitated, clutching her worn-out handbag. "I'm here to see Mr. Ethan Hale," she said softly. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" Grace shook her head. "No, but he left something for me." "I just need to return it." The woman sighed, clearly unconvinced. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Hale doesn't see walk-ins." Grace's shoulders sank. She turned to leave, feeling foolish for even trying. But just as she reached the door, a familiar deep voice spoke behind her. "It's okay." "Let her in." She froze. That voice, calm, commanding, unmistakable. She turned slowly and saw him standing there, dressed sharply in a black suit, his expression unreadable yet warm. For a moment, the world went silent again. Ethan Hale smiled faintly. "Miss Grace, isn't it? Her throat tightened. You remember? He nodded. I don't forget faces that remind me of something real. Grace swallowed hard, stepping closer. Mr. Hale, I came to return this. I can't accept it. She extended the envelope toward him, her hands trembling slightly. He looked at it, then at her. It wasn't charity, he said quietly. It was a thank you. Grace sat quietly in the marble-floored lobby, her worn handbag resting on her lap. Everything around her gleamed. Glass walls, silver elevators, expensive suits swishing past her like waves of another world. She felt painfully out of place, yet somehow she couldn't bring herself to leave. Ethan Hale had asked her to wait, and something deep inside told her she should. Her reflection in the polished wall looked tired. The faint circles under her eyes betrayed years of sleepless nights. Still, there was something in her gaze, an ember of dignity, a quiet strength. She wasn't here to beg or ask for more. She was here to return what didn't belong to her. After what felt like forever, the elevator chimed softly. Ethan stepped out, his jacket folded over one arm. The lines of stress around his eyes now softened. When he spotted her, his lips curved into a faint smile, not the charming smile of a billionaire accustomed to admiration, but something gentler, almost human. Grace, he said, his voice steady but warm. I didn't think you'd actually come. She stood, gripping the envelope tighter. I couldn't not come. What you did last night, it was too much. Ethan motioned toward the quiet cafe inside the building. Come, let's talk somewhere less intimidating. They took a corner table by the window. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was searching, full of unspoken thoughts. Finally, Grace broke it. I appreciate your kindness, Mr. Hale, but I can't accept money from someone I don't know. I'm not looking for help. Ethan studied her for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. Then what are you looking for, Grace? She hesitated. Just a fair chance, a job, a way to stand on my own again. Her words hung in the air, honest and raw. Ethan leaned back, intrigued. What did you used to do before? He trailed off, not wanting to pry too deeply. She finished for him softly. Before everything fell apart. I was a teacher. 3rd grade. I loved it. His expression shifted, a flicker of respect. A teacher. He nodded slowly. That explains a lot. Explains what? She asked, a small defensive edge in her tone. The way you looked at your kids. The way you shared one meal without making them feel it wasn't enough. His voice dropped lower. That kind of grace doesn't come from weakness. It comes from strength. Grace looked down, unsure how to respond. Compliments weren't something she received often. Strength doesn't pay the rent, she murmured. Ethan smiled faintly. No, but it earns respect. And maybe opportunity. Her eyes flicked up. What do you mean? He took a sip of his coffee, then leaned forward. I run a foundation, part of my company's outreach. We're trying to open a learning center in the city's lower district, a place for underprivileged kids to study after school. We've been struggling to find the right person to manage it. Grace's breath hitched. And you're saying? I'm saying, he interrupted gently, maybe someone who knows what it's like to fight for a child's future should be the one leading it. She stared at him, stunned. Mr. Hale, I don't even have a degree anymore. I had to stop my courses midway after my husband passed. I'm not qualified for something like that. He shook his head. You're more qualified than you think. Grace wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this wasn't pity, that this wasn't another act of charity wrapped in polite words. But years of disappointment made her cautious. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Why me? Ethan's expression turned distant for a moment. Because once a stranger believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Maybe I'm just returning the favor. There was something heavy in his voice, an old wound hidden behind his calm demeanor. Grace caught it but didn't ask. After a pause, Ethan slid a business card across the table. Come by the foundation office tomorrow. No promises, no pressure. Just see what it's about. Grace looked at the card. It felt unreal, like a door cracking open after years of darkness. I'll think about it, she said softly. That's all I ask. They shared a quiet smile before she stood to leave. As she turned to go, Ethan called after her. Grace. She stopped, glancing back. He nodded slightly. Don't let pride stop you from accepting what you've earned. Her heart thudded. She didn't reply. She couldn't. She just gave a small nod and walked away, the sound of her footsteps echoing against the marble floor. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the evening sky. For the first time in years, Grace felt a spark of hope, small but alive. The next morning dawned gray and still. The city was slow to wake, wrapped in a cold mist that made everything feel heavy. Grace stood by the cracked bathroom mirror in her tiny apartment, brushing her daughter's hair while her son packed his worn-out backpack. She hadn't slept much. Ethan Hale's words kept echoing through her mind. Don't let pride stop you from accepting what you've earned. She didn't know what to make of him. No man had ever spoken to her that way. Not with pity, but with respect. There was something steady in his eyes, something real. Still, she couldn't shake the unease. People like him didn't just appear in the lives of people like her. Not without a reason. After walking her kids to school, she stopped outside the glass doors of the Hale Foundation for Education. The building stood between two skyscrapers, modest compared to his empire but radiating warmth. Bright murals painted by children covered the entrance, and the sound of laughter drifted from inside. Grace hesitated, her fingers gripping the strap of her handbag. Then she took a deep breath and went in. Inside, the space felt alive. Shelves of books, art supplies stacked neatly, the faint smell of chalk and paper. A young woman at the desk smiled. You must be Grace. Mr. Hale said you might come. Grace's heart skipped. He told you? The woman nodded, handing her a clipboard. He's in the classroom upstairs. Go right up. As Grace climbed the wooden staircase, she could hear voices, children reciting, teachers instructing. Then she saw him. Ethan Hale, billionaire, in rolled-up sleeves and jeans, helping a little boy draw on the chalkboard. It was such a strange human sight that she froze in place. He looked up and smiled. You came. Grace stepped forward, trying to mask her nerves. I said I'd think about it. I didn't promise, he chuckled softly. And yet here you are. That's a good start. She found herself smiling back, something she hadn't done easily in years. He showed her around, the small classrooms, the reading corners, the volunteers helping children with homework. Everywhere she looked, she saw potential, hope woven into chaos. We want this place to be a second home for kids who have none, Ethan said, his voice quiet. A place where they feel seen. Grace turned to him, a soft admiration in her eyes. You really care about this? He nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. I grew up not far from here. People think money erases your past, but it doesn't. I remember what it's like to go to bed hungry, to pretend everything's fine so your mother doesn't worry. The confession startled her. Ethan Hale, billionaire, philanthropist, business legend, once poor? Before she could respond, his assistant appeared at the door. Mr. Hale, your noon meeting's waiting. With Ms. Preston. Ethan's expression faltered for a moment, just a flicker. Right. Tell her I'll be there shortly. Grace caught it. That small shift in his tone, the name that clearly carried weight. Ms. Preston? She asked. He hesitated, then met her gaze. An old business associate. But the way he said it made Grace wonder if there was more to that story. She nodded politely, pretending not to notice the tension. After he left, Grace stayed behind to observe the children. Something about the place stirred her heart. A little girl approached, shyly holding a picture she'd drawn. Are you our new teacher? Grace smiled. I don't know yet, maybe. The girl grinned. You should be. You look nice. It was such a simple compliment, but it hit Grace like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine, what if this was her chance to start again? But outside the building, across the street, that same black car idled quietly. Inside, the woman from before, Veronica Preston, sat watching through tinted glass. Her lips curved into a cold smile. Ethan Hale's former fiancé, the one who'd left him 2 years ago for a rival businessman when she realized love couldn't compete with ambition. Now she was back, not for love, but for leverage. And seeing Ethan laughing with a struggling single mom was exactly the scandal she needed to destroy him. She snapped a photo through her phone. Ethan, smiling at Grace, surrounded by children. Perfect. Later that afternoon, Ethan returned to his office. Veronica was already there, crossing her long legs and smirking like someone who owned the place. Still saving the world, Ethan? She said sweetly. I saw your new project. Very touching. Ethan's jaw clenched. What do you want, Veronica? Just a conversation, she said, her tone dripping with charm. You know, the media's going to love this story. Billionaire CEO seen bonding with a single mother from the slums. A real fairy tale. He narrowed his eyes. Don't, she leaned forward, smirking. Then make it worth my while not to. Ethan's patience snapped. You always did love leverage, Veronica shrugged. I just love headlines. You, on the other hand, you've gone soft. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you so much as mention her name to anyone, I'll make sure every deal you're chasing dies before it starts. Do we understand each other? The following week passed in a blur of new beginnings. Grace officially accepted Ethan's offer to help manage the learning center. The decision hadn't come easily. She had fought with her pride, weighed every fear, but in the end her children's faces made the choice for her. Each morning, she arrived early, unlocking the front doors just as the city began to wake. She loved the smell of chalk dust and paint, the laughter of kids who didn't have much but carried enough joy to fill a room. For the first time in years, Grace felt purpose again. Ethan visited often, though he tried not to linger too long. Every time their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. Respect, maybe curiosity, or something gentler neither dared to name. He watched her with the children, saw how she spoke to them softly but firmly, teaching them not just math or reading but courage. One afternoon, as she was helping a boy spell his name, Ethan appeared at the door. Grace, he called, smiling. You have a minute? She stood, brushing chalk from her hands. Of course. He gestured for her to follow him into the office. Inside, sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting golden stripes across the floor. He motioned for her to sit. I wanted to tell you something, he began, his tone uncharacteristically hesitant. The board approved the funding for 3 more centers. They'll open next quarter, and I want you to oversee them. Grace blinked, stunned. Me? He nodded. You've built something real here, Grace. The kids trust you. The parents trust you. That's worth more than any degree or title. She swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said softly. She smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her tired eyes. Then yes. But their quiet moment didn't last. Outside, a sudden commotion broke through the hallway. Voices rose, urgent, confused. Ethan frowned and stepped out, Grace close behind him. 2 journalists had entered the lobby, cameras flashing, microphones raised. Mr. Hale? Mr. Hale, one of them shouted. Is it true you've been secretly supporting a single mother from the inner city? Rumor says she's living off company money. Grace froze. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's not true, he said firmly. This woman works for my foundation. She's earned everything she has. The second reporter, a woman with sharp eyes, thrust a tablet toward him. Then care to explain these photos? Ethan glanced, and his stomach dropped. There it was, a series of pictures taken over the last few days. Him walking Grace to her car, Grace carrying her sleeping daughter in her arms while he held her umbrella. A shot of them laughing together inside the classroom. The photos were innocent, but the captions beneath them were not. Billionaire's secret charity case? Single mom becomes CEO's mystery companion. Scandal or sympathy stunt? Grace's face turned pale. The children behind her had gone silent. Her heart thudded painfully as realization sank in. They're going to think Ethan interrupted, his voice low but steady. Don't say it. None of this is your fault. But she could already feel the eyes on her, the whispers forming. All it took was one rumor to turn kindness into scandal. That evening, the story spread like wildfire. Blogs, news outlets, gossip sites, all carrying the same twisted version of the truth. Grace didn't even open her phone. She didn't have to. Her landlord knocked on her door that night, expression cold. Look, Grace, I saw the news. I can't have drama here. Maybe it's best if you find another place. Her children clung to her arms, frightened. Grace could only nod numbly. Meanwhile, Ethan was in his office, his team scrambling to contain the damage. It's Veronica Preston, his assistant confirmed grimly. She leaked the photos. Ethan's jaw set like stone. I warned her. She doesn't care, the assistant replied. She's already booked an interview for tomorrow morning. Says she has inside knowledge of your relationship. Ethan slammed his hand against the desk, fury flaring through him. Relationship? She's twisting everything. Public opinion's not going to care about the truth, the assistant said quietly. They'll see what she wants them to see. Ethan turned away, raking a hand through his hair. For years, he'd managed to build an empire out of discipline and distance. He never gave the tabloids anything to feed on. Now, one act of compassion was being dragged through the mud, and Grace was paying the price. That night, he drove through the rain until he reached her neighborhood. The streets were narrow, lined with flickering lamps. He parked outside her building, heart pounding, and climbed the stairs. She opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling. "Why did you come here?" "Because you shouldn't face this alone," he said gently. Grace shook her head, tears spilling over. "I told you this would happen." "People like you, people like me, we don't live in the same world. You can survive this." "I can't," Ethan's voice broke with guilt. "I'll fix it, Grace. I'll tell the press the truth." You can't," she said bitterly. "They won't believe you. They'll say I planned this. Her voice cracked. "That I used my children to get your sympathy." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his tone. "Then I'll give them something else to believe." Grace frowned through her tears. "What do you mean?" Morning came with the fury of headlines. Every news channel, every social feed was ablaze with one name, Ethan Hale, the billionaire philanthropist, the untouchable mogul, now branded with scandal. "Billionaire's secret love affair exposed," one banner screamed. Another went further. "Single mother turns CEO's charity into goldmine?" Grace sat in her kitchen, staring at the flickering screen of an old television. Her kids, still in their pajamas, watched her silently. She had tried to act normal, to smile through breakfast, but her trembling hands gave her away. The world had twisted something pure into something cruel. Again. Her daughter's small voice broke the silence. "Mommy, why are they saying bad things about you?" Grace swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Because sometimes people don't know the truth, sweetheart." "But that's okay." "We do," her son's fists clenched. "I hate them." "They don't even know you." Grace gathered them close, her heart breaking. "No, baby, don't hate them. Just pray that someday they understand." But her faith wavered. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, neighbors, even people she used to know. Some called out of fake concern, others out of judgment. She couldn't step outside without feeling eyes on her. Then the call came. Ethan. Grace. His voice was low, steady, the calm before a storm. "I'm holding the conference in 1 hour. I want you to be there." Grace hesitated. "Ethan, I can't. The more they see me, the worse it'll get." "No," he said firmly. "They've already painted their version of the truth. Now it's time we tell ours." His words carried a quiet conviction that steadied her heart. She took a deep breath. "Then I'll be there." An hour later, the world gathered outside Hale Enterprises. Dozens of cameras lined the steps, reporters jostling for a glimpse of the man who had built an empire on integrity. The tension buzzed like electricity. When Ethan appeared, the crowd erupted. Flashes, shouts, questions. But his gaze was calm, his stride sure. Grace stood in the back, her hood up, unnoticed for now. He stepped to the podium, pausing as the noise died down. Then, in a voice firm and clear, he began. "I've read the headlines. I've seen the lies, and I know what the world thinks it knows." He looked up, his gaze sweeping the sea of cameras. "So, let me tell you the truth." He motioned for someone at the side. Grace hesitated, then stepped forward. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras turned. "This woman," Ethan continued, "is not a scandal. She is not a charity case. Her name is Grace Miller. She's a mother, a teacher, and one of the strongest people I've ever met." The press quieted, taken aback by the sincerity in his tone. Ethan went on. "When I met her, she was sharing one meal with her 2 children, not because she was careless, but because she was brave enough to give them everything she had left. And that night reminded me of something I'd forgotten, what real humanity looks like." Grace's eyes burned with tears she tried to hide. Ethan turned toward her, his voice softening. "She didn't ask for help. She earned respect, and if the world can't see that, then maybe the problem isn't her, it's us." For a moment, silence blanketed the crowd. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Then a sharp voice cut through. Veronica Preston stepping forward from the reporter's circle, microphone in hand. Her expression was poised, but her eyes gleamed with poison. "Beautiful speech, Ethan," she said smoothly. "But are we really supposed to believe this is all professional? You've been seen together constantly. Dinners, meetings, late-night visits. Sounds like more than just charity." The crowd buzzed again, the whispers spreading like wildfire. Grace's breath caught. Ethan didn't flinch. "You're right," he said quietly. The crowd gasped. Grace's heart stopped. "I have been seeing her. Ethan continued, stepping forward, his gaze locking on Veronica. But not because she needed saving. Because I did. A stunned silence followed. Ethan's voice trembled slightly now, honest and raw. For years, I've built walls made of money and pride. I thought success meant never needing anyone. But Grace reminded me that strength isn't about how high you stand. It's about how much you give when you have nothing left. He turned toward Grace, his eyes soft but steady. She taught me that. Reporters shouted questions. Veronica's face hardened, fury flashing behind her perfect smile. So you admit it then? She pressed. You're involved with her? Ethan took a breath. I admit that she changed my life. And if that's the story you want to tell, go ahead. But make sure you write the truth. She's the hero, not me. The crowd erupted again, flashes, gasps, murmurs. Grace stood frozen, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected him to fight for her, to risk everything this way. She wanted to be angry, but instead, tears streamed freely down her cheeks. Then, to everyone's shock, she stepped up to the microphone beside him. Mr. Hale, she whispered, trembling. You didn't have to do this. He smiled faintly. Yes, I did. Grace turned to the crowd, her voice shaky but sincere. I don't have power or money. I've made mistakes like anyone, but everything I have I've worked for. If helping a man remember kindness makes me guilty, then I'll wear that proudly. The rain fell softly that night, gentle yet endless, washing over the city like a quiet apology. The streets shimmered under the glow of street lamps and the world seemed slower, as if pausing to breathe after the storm. Grace stood beneath the awning of the community center, locking up for the last time that day. Her reflection rippled faintly in a puddle at her feet. Tired, older than her years, but somehow lighter. The past weeks had been a blur of noise and change. Donations had poured in for the kids. Her small after-school program had turned into a citywide initiative overnight. Reporters now wanted to highlight her story, the meal that changed a billionaire's heart. Yet fame was never her goal. What mattered was simple. The children now had warmth, books, and full stomachs. As she closed the door and stepped out into the drizzle, she saw him waiting across the street, Ethan Hale, umbrella in hand, still in his tailored coat, but looking nothing like the billionaire who once commanded boardrooms. His eyes softened the moment they met hers. You'll catch a cold standing there, Grace called, half smiling. He shrugged, walking toward her. You always say that. She laughed, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. Because it's always true. He held out the umbrella, but instead of taking it, she stepped under it beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. They just stood there, listening to the steady rhythm of the rain. The city around them faded into a blur of light and mist. I saw the news, Grace said finally, her voice quiet. They called your speech revolutionary. Ethan smiled faintly. They can call it whatever they want. I just told the truth. You risked your entire company for that truth. He nodded slowly. And for the first time, it felt worth it. Grace looked away, blinking back tears she hadn't expected. You didn't have to do that for me. He turned to face her fully, his voice low but steady. Grace, I didn't do it for you. I did it because of you. Because I realized that all the power and wealth I built meant nothing if I couldn't use it for something real. Her breath caught. Something real? He smiled. You, the kids. The way you never stopped believing, even when the world was cruel. You showed me what real strength looks like. The rain grew heavier, the patter against the umbrella louder. Grace looked up at him, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. And what happens when the next storm comes? When people talk again? Ethan reached out, gently brushing away a raindrop that had slipped down her cheek. Then we remind them, again and again if we have to, kindness doesn't fade because of gossip. For a long time, she just looked at him, the world narrowing to the space between their breaths. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the same man who had quietly watched her share one meal with her children, who had seen beauty where others saw pity. And then, a small voice echoed from behind her. Mom? They turned to see Lily and Noah standing at the door, jackets half-zipped, watching shyly. Ethan's face lit up instantly. He knelt down, smiling. Hey, partners. I thought you two went home. Lily grinned. We were waiting for you. Noah, more serious, stepped closer. Are you really going to help Mom build the big center? Ethan nodded solemnly. If your mom says yes, Grace's eyes widened. Ethan, he stood, rain glinting in his hair. I bought the lot next to this one. It's empty now, but it won't be for long. I want to help you expand your program. Real classrooms, real meals. Every child who walks in deserves the same chance your kids have. Grace's lips parted in disbelief. Ethan, that's... He shook his head, cutting her off softly. It's not charity. It's partnership. You lead, I'll follow. For a moment, all she could do was stare. The man who once hid behind his fortune now offering it without pride, without pretense. And somewhere deep inside her, the wall she'd built, the one made of exhaustion and fear, finally began to crumble. Her voice trembled. You're impossible, you know that? He chuckled. I've been told. She smiled through her tears. Then I guess we start tomorrow. No, he said gently, looking up at the sky. We start now. He handed the umbrella to Lily, then stepped into the rain, holding out his hand to Grace. Come on.